Steve, some of the early 20th century architects like Gropius and Buckminster Fuller envisioned homes as dwelling machines with integrated systems and structural elements, greater reliance on natural lighting and ventilation, and the potential for inexpensive mass off-site fabrication. Loblolly House and the Cellophane House, both designed by Kieran Timberlake, go several steps further by virtue of their technology integration, sustainability, potential for material recycling, and possibilities for mass customization. Can these principles be extended to mass-produced housing in 21st century America, despite historic resistance to non-traditional construction methods and off-site fabrication?
There were a lot of reasons why those earlier agendas couldn't be fully realized, and there are technologies available today to suggest that they can be more readily realized. And I'll give you one good example. One key example, for instance, is parametric computer modeling. It sounds like a small change, but it's actually kind of a revolutionary change in our industry over only the last decade, that we can fully model buildings before we make them so that they are three-dimensional, fully three-dimensional in the round in a computer. And you can understand and put every joint and every detail into it, into the model, in a way that gives you complete certitude about the dimensions of pieces and how they integrate together, and the tolerances between pieces and how they fit. And that simple little technological change in its own right gives one the capacity to build products off-site, houses and parts of houses off-site, and be certain that when they come to the field to be assembled, they will actually fit together the way an automobile fits together in a factory or the way an aircraft fits in a factory. And that's a revolutionary change from just the earlier generations of modern architects, where they didn't have that certitude. Architecture and building design and construction has always been built sequentially, where you put up a frame, measure things, fabricate other pieces to fit the frame, put those on, then measure those. So it was a sequential act. It can now be a simultaneous act because of the certitude of dimensions afforded to us with new computer modeling, particularly parametric modeling, fully three-dimensional modeling. And that alone, I think, changes the prospects for this industry to go forward with off-site fabrication in the future. And there are a lot of reasons why it's important that we do so. Labor costs continue to escalate. The difficulty in terms of enhancing productivity in the field, with all of the field conditions one finds working in a building with lots of people, trying to work in small areas at the same time. They're all very problematic in terms of enhancing productivity of the design professions and construction professions. And to the degree that we can build more products off-site, they are either whole homes ultimately, or put together into whole homes, or parts of even larger buildings. We're going to enhance productivity. We're going to speed up the overall act of construction. And if enough volume can be realized, there's the potential really to ultimately lower the cost. So in a way, that's been a holy grail for all of design and building construction for much of the last century. And we're in a much stronger position to realize it now than we have ever been in.
So Steve, what would these mass-produced dwelling machines look like, and how would they differ from today's tract housing?
They don't necessarily have to look different. They just have to be fabricated and built differently. My own view is that they can and should look different, that you should be able to read within those dwellings some of the way in which they're assembled, and ultimately that if you can see that and read that in the form of the building, it means you can disassemble it more easily if you want to change out pieces over time. But it's not necessarily the case that they have to look differently. But there are advantages, I think, in exposing the elements of construction that go into these and not completely masking them, that will bear further benefits down the line as one wants to change a house out. So, but they don't necessarily have to look or appear differently.
How might we expect then people to interact differently with their homes than they do today, in terms of what their home means to them or how they engage in their homes on a day-to-day basis? Any differences there, Steve?
In general, most homes over the last 50 years have trended in the direction of having systems put in them that work better when the house is closed to the outdoors. Air conditioning systems, heating systems, and increasingly today, we're looking at systems that are more passive and allow you to use less energy in the first place. And that's moving back in a way to earlier technologies of operability that would allow buildings to be opened more to the outside for seasonal benefits rather than always relying on energy. So that's something that I think is returning to the past in a way, but is becoming part of the future. In addition to that, I think there are feedback mechanisms available today for how a dwelling is actually performing that are rapidly moving into the fore as sensing technologies and operating technologies that allow one to tune a dwelling to particular comfort and performance uses and understand how a building is performing, get sensors and feedback on performance that allow you to interact with the house more. So I think one of the things we're going to see going ahead is houses that are much more capable of being tuned in dozens of different ways for the purpose of physical comfort than we have now, where more or less you turn the dial up or you turn the dial down, and you either make it hotter or you either make it colder. And we're going to be using more sophisticated controls for the energy producing equipment that we have so that we can use less energy and be more comfortable fundamentally.
So Steve, what then are the implications for the construction industry in terms of on-site construction as today versus modular fabrication and assembly and the kinds of materials used? And earlier you mentioned timing and cost of construction, and especially what about the potential for mass customization of housing?
Construction that doesn't require wet operations that take time to dry out and cure, but instead components of buildings that are clipped together and can be unclipped and taken apart, assemblable and disassemblable. We're going to see more and more of that. It's in essence the way automobiles are put together, and to a significant degree, aircraft, shipbuilding, a lot of components basically are fabricated elsewhere. They don't require finishing in the field. They don't require, wet setting, literally, and they're just simply fastened together and clipped together. And as you go around and look at new construction today, you see more and more of that in terms of building facades. Facades that would have been brick a few years ago are now often panelized materials, metal materials, plastics even, all kinds of composites that are really literally brought to the site dry and being clipped together. That's a significant and important trend overall in the industry and change in terms of fundamental construction methodologies and materials we use. Those materials are inherently lighter than materials we used to build with. They're less expensive as a result to transport, easier to move when you get them to a construction site. But the biggest single difference is, they can be, really lifted as a whole assembly and put into place with less field labor. So that's a, really dramatic, change on the way. And, I can kind of see it every day when you drive around this city and look at what's going on and how buildings are going up. You see more and more work in that way. With regard to mass customization, one difference between automobiles that have a certain amount of mass customization, for instance, in buildings, is that in general, buildings are always going to require more mass customization than products that move, like cars or planes. And that's because of sites. And when a building is fastened to a site, there are specific circumstances on a site that always require some differentiation in the products. It could be the size of the products can't be quite as standardized. The particular finishes of them can't be quite as standardized. But again, manufacturing processes are shifting in the same way that computer modeling capacities have shifted to make that possible going ahead in terms of fabrication. So we're already seeing a lot of capacity to customize things that just a decade ago you would have been told it's a standard product. We can't do anything different with it without completely changing the model and making it a custom product. That's not the case anymore. There's often limited amounts, at least, of customization that you can input into a otherwise mass fabricated products.
Steve, a new home today is typically a tabula rasa that gets painted, decorated, furnished, and landscaped. And over time, paint, flooring, fixtures, systems, furnishings get upgraded or replaced. But for homes like the Loblolly house or the Cellophane house, systems, structures, spaces, and surfaces are far more holistically integrated. If such integration was the pattern for future housing, how might we expect homeowners to approach decorating or furnishing or upgrading their homes differently than they do today?
We might expect to see a shift going ahead that's more focused on leaving walls intact and focusing more on furniture as the element of style within a house, and fewer things that are necessarily attached to the walls of the building. Just a guess, but I think there are a lot of reasons for that possible trend. One is that, for instance, in Loblolly House, it has wood walls that are naturally finished, and they don't really need any attention other than occasional cleaning, possibly for 60, 70 years. And you can change the life cycle cost of a dwelling significantly by putting in materials like that, naturally finished materials that don't require constant renewal, whether it's painting or wallpapering, and have warmth and interest to them, and not have to bear that expense, not have to bear the expenses of, and the environmental expenses, either of toxic paints, adhesive, things like that in a building, and the off-gassing associated with them. So I think there are a lot of lifestyle reasons behind that as well. Potentially people are moving a lot more, and investing more in permanent things that are fixed to a dwelling is becoming, I think, less and less desirable from that perspective. So overall, I think it's an important question. I think there's some changes in the home furnishings industry, so to speak, that we'll be seeing in the years ahead. Personally, I wouldn't want to be in the wallpaper business, because I think that other types of finishes that are more permanent may well lie ahead, across the industry as a whole.
Will houses of the future even be able to be upgraded or improved, or will they need to be quote unquote refabricated in part or in whole? For example, would a kitchen or bathroom module be replaced as opposed to new fixtures or flooring being installed and walls painted?
I can foresee a time when, instead of going through all of the difficulty of living through a home renovation that comes along with bathrooms and kitchens, and we've all done it, you're disrupted for a substantial period of time. There's a lot of dirt and dust in your house. You're without the use of important equipment in the house. You could easily foresee a time coming ahead where, instead of doing that, these elements could be basically unclipped from the house and pulled out, and new ones walked in and plugged in. And The convenience of it is dramatically different. You could also start to imagine aftermarkets in the same way we have used cars. You can have a used bathroom or a used kitchen, things like that, that would start to crop up. And you could potentially see an industry out there that's quite different than the one we know now, where we're buying a toilet and a sink. Instead of that, you buy a shell of a bathroom with the fixtures already integrated to it, and they're just simply quick coupled into the infrastructure of the house, the plumbing infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure, and that's it.
Okay, so in this brave new world, is there still a place for the homeowners, a do-it-yourselfer, and making home improvements? And how might that role really be different in the future?
That's a real popular thing to actually, as a homeowner, get your tools and go to work on the house. And, again, going ahead, if in fact building components are modularized into larger and larger elements, it won't completely eliminate the capacity of the homeowner to tinker and change and tune things, but it will change it. Let's put it that way. They'll be more sophisticated, more holistically integrated into larger elements. And, they could certainly in part maybe be disassembled, but less likely. That whole question of, the home improvement industry might really start to shift in the years ahead. Instead of seeing aisles with, thousands of individual parts and plumbing fittings, you might really see a more limited number of parts that are larger and aggregated and whole, that are being sold whole as opposed to as individual parts. And, that you could still have a homeowner potentially install those things. In fact, it might even be easier going ahead, frankly, for homeowners to do things that they're not doing on their own today. For instance, that bathroom that I described, you could imagine actually not needing plumbers and electricians to do this work. If that element can be basically clipped in and quick coupled, anybody could do it. It's just like screwing a garden hose onto a faucet spigot. Things I think would be really shifting in that regard and in that whole realm in some exciting ways, important ways. Just imagine a Home Depot aisle where, you don't have literally millions of parts for sale, just a more limited number. And that may well lie ahead for us.
So, Steve, we've been talking a little bit about the implications for the home improvements industries. And what about, though, the construction industry, too, which is really geared for on-site construction and more of an incremental approach to renovations and improvements? What's the implication there for those industries?
Well, if more and more work starts to shift off-site into factories, the locus for employment, one could expect to shift from more field work to more factory work. Wouldn't necessarily cut the number of jobs. It might, but you'd see a change in where one's working. You could see lots of enhancements to worker safety and productivity if you're working off-site in controlled factory settings compared to on-site in rather dangerous, uncontrolled or less controlled settings. I think you'd see even changes in who's doing construction work. You could expect to see, and we already see in factories, significantly more women working in construction-related activities than we see in the field. So I think there are a lot of demographic shifts that would come potentially with that change as well. Labor costs in the field, escalate continuously, in seemingly uncontrolled ways, and it's hard to really enhance productivity in the field compared to the productivity that you could affect actually working more off-site in a factory. So there could be some real gains overall for the construction industry with more off-site work. But it would certainly change. It would change the labor factor compared to the way we think about it today.
Steve, over the past decade, sustainability has moved from a niche position to dominating the built environment discourse. Yet in new home construction, sustainability seems to be far less holistic and still more within the realm of add-ons and upgrades, often adding cost to the home. KieranTimberlake designed a house for the Make It Right Foundation in New Orleans that was affordable by virtue of being constructed of sustainable materials, largely fabricated off-site, and designed to minimize energy usage. Looking to the future, will sustainability become more intrinsically incorporated into housing design, materials, construction, and operation?
Oh, it has to. It has to. And it is a movement that really, in the last dozen years, has come, as you noted, from very much a niche market to a dominating force in the marketplace. The logic behind it is so compelling that for those that don't get out ahead of it, they won't be in existence probably in another decade. It's that dramatic and fast a shift. And there are a lot of reasons behind it. One is certainly just money, literally. If you can save money on energy and save money on water, save money on maintenance and upkeep, all of those add up to a huge portion of the cost of owning a building, not just the first cost, but more the operating cost over time. And that's ultimately more significant than the first cost. And that's an important part of the impetus for the environmental movement. It's literally just money. And it's a potent one. It's a very potent one. Secondly, there's the regulatory system being put in place, which state by state is moving increasingly in the direction of mandating energy performance. And then thirdly, there's just the marketplace itself, with a younger and younger clientele being educated and brought up in a time when resources for them have never been perceived as unlimited and have been always presented as something that one needs to be ethically responsible for and be a good steward of. For those manufacturers of building products, for those constructors and builders, and for those designers who really understand how to integrate to optimize performance of a building, they're going to be in a really enormously enhanced market position compared to those who don't follow. So there's probably been no single movement I can think of in my career, or that I know of even really in the last century, that's kind of swept the marketplace the way sustainability has. And it's a wonderful thing to see, but its time has come, and for those that aren't attentive to it, literally, they're not going to be around.
Mm-hmm. Steve, you mentioned that some of the companies that, if they're not ahead of it, aren't going to be around. What would a company really need to do to lead in this area? And do you expect the leadership to come from the traditional home building industry or from some other sector? It's
not begun with the traditional home building industry. It's really come more from architects who typically don't design but a rather small percentage of the traditional home building market. So I don't know that the leadership early on is coming out of the traditional home building industry. I would think that over time, though, that leadership could well shift into that industry. There's immense opportunity to really make some headway because of the volume of the traditional home building industry. You're going to see houses that are more operable, more capable of being open to the outside in shoulder seasons, and capable of managing their environmental energy loads and other loads down. And, that we'll see more and more of that going ahead. One interesting point in this is that some of the leadership on that side of the equation for less expensive, highly replicated mass production of housing may come from overseas. There's already a lot of high-performing environmental dwellings that are mass fabricated overseas, and we've been working for some years now on mass customized high-performance, environmental performance housing for India and for emerging marketplaces like that, where they have to build enormous amounts of housing very quickly, and they don't have the utility infrastructures in place to support all this new housing. So there's a huge premium in a place like that on dwellings that are almost self-sustaining from an energy perspective, from a water management perspective, and we're going to see more and more of that at large scale, and at scales and quantities that could really start to lower cost dramatically overseas in the years ahead in developing markets. And that could make its way back to the United States from there.
So, Steve, you anticipated my next question, which is really how we would expect people to approach sustainability and engage their homes differently than they do today with a new, more integrated home. For instance, will there be more reliance on sunlight and natural air circulation versus mechanical HVAC systems, and more flexible boundaries between indoors and outdoors, and other means of more optimally utilizing energy in the home?
Right now, most homes, most mass-produced homes, have relatively few windows. The window-to-wall ratio is highly skewed toward the wall, and in lots of environments, it can be more optimal to have more windows and less wall, open things more, allow, in temperate climates, for instance, allow for passive use of the outdoors to make your home comfortable, and less on equipment. And that's, certainly on the way, and will have a profound impact on dwellings. And there's a tremendous amount going on in that industry right now in terms of how to make houses more energy efficient without using energy. But I do think that we will all be operating our houses more and opening them up and closing them down more. And I have personally a home that requires that, and have found it to be one of the most pleasant experiences in my life to actually have fresh air in a house and to be attentive throughout the course of the day to what is going on outside, and to be able to listen to and feel and hear it, and in essence adjust your house without the use of any energy other than what nature provides to make it as comfortable as possible. And it not only saves energy, but it's just more pleasant to actually have air moving through your home, across your body, and using more natural ways to make ourselves comfortable. And it does reconnect you to the natural world in ways that we've become increasingly disconnected from, and that are very positive. So it may have a lot of benefits that people aren't even thinking about, that are more along the lines, not so much of just how much you save, but how much better you feel when you're connected to the natural world and to the outdoors.
With respect to housing, where is the industry today in terms of capability to gauge architectural performance and the drive process of continuous enhancement?
I'd say the industry's nowhere in terms of its present capacity to really provide sophisticated feedback to the consumer, the homeowner, or the building owner about performance. It's such a crude mechanism. Basically, you look at the thermometer or the thermostat on the wall of this room, tells you the temperature in here, and that's about it. And It doesn't tell you the temperature against that glass wall where maybe you're sitting all day. It doesn't tell you how much infiltration is coming through that wall. It's a pretty crude mechanism. And one way to think about this just in the natural world is a biologist I know has said, who studies moths, said a moth has several thousand sensors in its wings to basically monitor its performance and manage the performance of a moth in flight, several thousand sensors. And we, as sophisticated as we are today, have one sensor in this office to tell us, that's the only information we're getting, is what's the temperature on that wall over there. That's it. Not even in the room as a whole, but on that wall. So we have a long way to go in terms of developing sensor networks and systems that could provide sophisticated feedback to enhance performance at the micro scale. And there's huge amounts of building performance that's probably left on the table, literally, and just not taken advantage of because we just simply don't know how things are actually working. And we don't have enough information available to tune it up and enhance performance. So it's a huge problem in the industry and a huge opportunity out there that lies ahead. Not just temperature, but all kinds of other factors, including infiltration of air, speed of air movement, seasonal differentiation. All those things can be understood, simply with expanded sensor packages that become part of building design and construction going ahead. Increasingly, they're wireless. Implementing expanded networks of sensory arrays in buildings can allow us to make the buildings perform better and at lower cost, and at the same time really make us more comfortable. So it's a huge opportunity out there, huge, and not being focused on nearly enough, in my view.
So Steve, looking ahead, what's the role of the homeowner in the context of continuous performance enhancement, and how might it change the way that people interact with their homes on a day-to-day basis?
I think instead of relying on professionals to come in and measure things and provide data and offer opinions on how to improve performance, increasingly this should become the new do-it-yourself industry for the homeowner. If it gets more difficult to do mechanic-based repairs to your home, it's going to be much more easy and more readily available to actually do performance-based enhancements to the improvement of your home. A lot of the sensors that are out there, as I previously said, once installed, can be literally downloaded onto your phone and controlled from your phone, understood from your phone. Graphs can be mapped out, and you can easily imagine homeowners starting to become interested in tinkering with and enhancing the performance of their homes once they're able to do it. But it should do nothing but enable and empower the individual to really go into their own dwelling, know how they live, and know what they can do to enhance performance. And you could easily see lots of people getting interested in that and wanting to do it. So, so I think that's, that could be the home repair industry of the future, is performance enhancements in your dwellings.
Steve, the early 20th century architect's vision of the house as a machine for living in often extended beyond the individual home to that of the whole community. And they envisioned a future with clean, affordable housing organized rationally into planned neighborhoods and cities. And urban planning and architecture became holistically entwined in their vision. What do you vision as the housing development of the future, and how does it differ from today's tract housing?
As you know, most most zoning today has tended to segregate uses, and the exception of that to some degree is in cities, but it's certainly true outside of cities that zoning tends to segregate more than integrate. That's shifting. I think some of the lessons of urbanism, as we've re-urbanized as a nation here in the U.S. and as the rest of the world is rapidly urbanizing, hugely, and very, very rapidly urbanizing, we've learned that the best strategies are not about segregation, they're about integration. It's fundamentally about integrating housing with services of all different sorts, commercial services, institutions, churches, schools, and getting these things closer and closer together rather than further and further apart is not only creating more vibrant, lively, round-the-clock, 7-day-a-week, 24-hour-a-day communities, but it's overall lowering the energy use of our culture. You can spend less time, less money, and less energy moving longer distances, and instead do more walking, get more exercise, visit and use facilities and commercial enterprises, institutional enterprises that are closer and closer. And that's a significant shift in the mindset of both individuals in our culture and increasingly regulatory authorities and boards and our laws. More and more individuals, particularly young, are moving into cities, and they're doing so in part because they want a more integrated life that has more available to them at closer distances, that doesn't require as much use of the automobile. That's certainly a shift that we're seeing more and more of, and slowly but surely zoning codes are following suit to support those degrees of integration.
So, Steve, then would we expect to see housing types such as single-family and multifamily, along with commerce and industry and institutions, as well as green spaces, more both spatially and functionally integrated in the city of the future?
Absolutely. I mean, that's already here, and it's going to get more and more intensively integrated. And increasingly, those individuals who like to work in places like that, like to live in places like that, that are active all the time and that have lots of commingled activities, different types of economic activity, institutional activities. So we're seeing more and more commingling, in increasingly, buildings have all different types of use in them. You're seeing office mixed in with hotel, mixed in with condominium housing, sometimes even small institutional uses put into them. So, more and more commingling of activity, and seems to have lots of benefits for everyone, for users, I have to believe lowers the economic risk profile to have more diversity of use in individual buildings and dwellings. Lots of positive things are coming out of this, and more of a sense that the dangers associated with commingling uses are far outweighed by the benefits.
Steve, final question. What should the residential construction and home improvements industries be doing today to set their sights on the housing market of tomorrow? And what are the implications for their business models, the products and services they provide, and the customers who they serve?
I think in all things, consumers are becoming more and more educated and more desirous of education. You can see, for instance, in the food industry over the last just few years, they regularly post the caloric intake and content associated with food offerings and other information about food. And I think you can see something similar, and we'll see something similar happening in the housing sector, that the consumer is going to become more and more educated in the years immediately ahead of us and more desirous of information to allow them to understand and manage and make informed choices about their housing, about the consumption of housing, if you will, in the same way that they are making more informed choices about the consumption of food. And examples of that abound. I think one example would be tools and ways of looking at buildings that are associated with life cycle analysis of the cost of a building and understanding everything in a building in a more sophisticated and detailed way before you make your decisions about where you're going to live and how you're going to live in it. And life cycle analysis involves information about various things. Certainly energy use is part of the equation, and really fully understanding that, understanding benchmarks that you can compare against and make informed choices against. But it also goes way beyond that to information about the toxicity of materials in a building, about the carbon and the amount of energy that is embodied in a building the day you buy it or open it and start to use it. And if you're in the housing industry or the building product industry, having those profiles and understanding that and presenting it to consumers is going to, I think, represent a sea change in the years ahead about how decisions are made, how people make decisions in industry about what to buy in the building design construction industry, what people want to buy, what they want to own, what they want to live in. And that was all unthinkable, again, just a few years ago, but is a transformation that's upon us. We can see it coming. And again, those who climb into it early make the information available and then start to modify their products to make the products perform better across important criteria that consumers ultimately tell the marketplace are important to them. They're going to thrive. Those that don't will wither and die away. So it's going to change the competitive marketplace, I would predict, as we all come to know more about what's really around us and what's really in it, what it's doing to us, what it's doing to our environment, what it's doing to our culture.
Steve, thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Jordan. It's been a real pleasure being here and enjoyed the conversation.